In this video, I'm going to take all the awesomeness of skill challenges and pack them into one round, one chance, one opportunity to contribute to your group's overall success or failure. I'm going to explain how these work real quick, then go into a real story example from my game table. And after that, I got a bunch of tips and tricks on how to use them in a wide variety of ways to keep your players engaged in this fast-paced challenge. Here's how they work. As usual, there's a skill challenge DC that is set that everyone has to beat. Each party member has one chance, one role to contribute towards the group's success or failure. Of course, if the group accumulates more successes than failures, they succeed. But if everyone's done with their checks and there's more failures, the group fails. This is different from normal skill challenges where you need a certain amount of successes before 3 failures. But coach, what if you have an even number of players? Don't worry, we'll get into that after this story. The party here consists of an Ancestral Guardian Barbarian, Horizon Walker Ranger, and 3 Warlocks. I know, it's a long story on that one, but we have a Gnome Archfey Patron and 2 twin Tiefling sisters of a Hexblade Warlock and a Great Old One. To set the stage, the group has been searching for the barbarian's grandmother that's held up in a cave with other refugees. They came to find out that this cave was actually a burrow to an Umberhulk queen. Through some careful exploration and many skirmishes, they were able to find the survivors, but they needed to kill this Queen Umberhulk before it was safe enough for everyone to be able to escape. The massive battle against this Umberhulk is a story in itself, but this skill challenge picks up right after they slay the queen. The Umberhulk lets out a piercing cry echoing through the cavernous lair as its massive body falls to the ground, carapace split in two. The party now stands over the body of this dead Umberhulk queen, victorious but exhausted. They have been pushed far beyond their limits, but Raven's grandmother, the tribal shaman, waits for the party along with the rest of the refugees hidden behind a waterfall. The party starts to hastily make their way back to this hidden refuge. But while making their way across the burrow, in their carelessness, the group alerted the attention of the now stirred up nest from that piercing cry. Umberhulk larvae and spiders of all sizes swarm the group, and now it's time for a one-round skill challenge. Arya, the Hexblade Warlock sister, charges forward first and ignites her fiery green whip. She tries to fight them off as they rush forward, but the whip can't function properly in such close and confined space. The spiders overwhelm and attack the already low-health Warlock, and she falls unconscious. The barbarian sees her ally drop to the ground and enters a rage to start desperately hurling insect after insect off of her friend. She starts throwing these spiders into each other like 8-legged dodgeballs and picks up her unconscious ally and charges forward through the tunnels. The party sprints through the sticky and webbed terrain as more and more insects come onto the group. They are almost halfway back to safety. The Gnome Warlock steps up and sees creatures start to surround them from the tunnels behind. He casts Shatter and tries to collapse the tunnel behind them to close it off. The shatter goes off, but it's not enough, and the storm starts to break through the rubble. The spiders from behind spray webs at the small gnome, but he quickly moves out of the way. The ranger tries to turn things around and sprints ahead, trying to look for a different path that they could go through. Somewhere that would give them more time to be able to heal Arya. But there are just too many of them, and if they stopped for even a second, they'd be overwhelmed. Arya stays unconscious, and hanging by a thread, the party is still being bombarded by these insects. They are so close to that hidden refuge behind the waterfall, but can they make it in time? Timeout. As you can see, this isn't going very well. They have technically already failed this skill challenge, but how bad will this actually be? Now this is very important, and my players know that this is not just a pass or fail skill challenge. It is very important for me as a DM for each one of their roles to matter. And one of the coolest parts about this that I'll get into later is that everyone contributes. So right now my players already know that they've failed, but I want them to understand the gravity of what happens with further failures, escalating the tension. I don't want my players to feel surprised or slighted when something big like this happens, and I want them to truly know how much this last roll means. So I literally tell them at the table, if there is one more failure, then Arya's life will be at stake. And the last character to be able to act on this is her twin sister, Zack. How fitting. The barbarian has Arya's unconscious body over her shoulder as the group sprints through the final stretch. Zack reaches out to her sister and tries to siphon her own life into hers. She drains herself down to almost nothing and pours everything she can into this one final attempt. The group makes it to the waterfall entrance and splashes through, tumbling down to the ground and hacking through the remaining spiders. But Arya's body lies there, motionless. The spell her sister cast was too late. She is now truly dead. The party knows what they must do, and they quickly snatch her limp body off the muddy floor and rush her to Raven's grandmother.
Hurry now, her life essence hangs by just a thread. But there is a chance that I can bring her back. Now, what do all of you have to offer the spirits?
This was the most suspenseful session that this group has ever had. because now after that, they had to go into a resurrection challenge and try and bring her back. But the conclusion of that story will be told in the Resurrection Part 2 video if that's something y'all want to see. I don't want to be a jerk and leave y'all with a cliffhanger, but it's the most epic resurrection challenge that I've ever run, and I feel like it deserves its own video. So if y'all do want to see that, you gotta let me know. And if this video gets 600 likes in the next 4 days, I'll do a follow-up to this story and connect it into my Homebrew Resurrection System Part 2 with some more tips. I'll also have links to Part 1 of the Resurrection video and my 2 other videos on skill challenges down in the description. Skill challenges came from 4th edition of D&D, and I first learned about them from the great Matt Colville, and when he readapted them for 5th edition. Of course, I've made my own personal tweaks to the system, but I created this 1-round skill challenge system myself, and my players have absolutely loved it, so I wanted to share it with you guys. Because we've all been in a situation like this at our game table. One big moment put in front of your entire party. For this story, my players had to get from point A to point B, and I knew they could do it, but how well would it go? Would they safely make their way back or not? Now, I never thought it would have gone how it did, but how would you run this as a DM? If you ran this as a combat, it'd have to take place across multiple maps, and it could be really clunky. And if you ran this like a normal skill challenge, which is what I would have done before I created this system, a lot of times those successes or failures are reached before everyone in the party can go. So now I have multiple tips for you guys on how you can bring this awesome system to your table and make it your own. There's a lot of things that this 1-round skill challenge can be a solution for, and I got multiple examples for you. So let's get into it. The first cool thing here I've already said, but it's this important, is everyone gets a turn. If I ran a normal skill challenge for that last example that I just gave, then once they hit 3 fails, it'd be over. And that last player, the twin sister, wouldn't have been able to go. That would have felt absolutely awful that her sister wouldn't have a chance to save her. Another rule here that you might have noticed if you paid close attention to the story is that you cannot repeat skill checks, just like in normal skill challenges. So once someone makes an athletics check, that's now off the table. Someone could do a flat strength check, but that wouldn't be as high of a modifier. When it comes to casting spells, especially if you have multiple spellcasters in your party, you gotta be creative as a DM as far as what you ask for each of the roles. So kind of like the athletics example I just gave, the first person that casts a spell, they get to do a spell check, which is their spellcasting ability modifier plus proficiency bonus. And if a second person just casts a spell with no creative description to try and be another skill check, then I would have them just make a spell ability modifier, which would just be a flat roll. But I've had some clerics and paladins get creative with religion, and some wizards get creative with arcana checks. Because come on DMs, let your players be creative. Second cool thing here is the tension that you can put on your players makes them think on their toes. Because when I throw a 1-round skill challenge at them, it's fast paced, like literally at the table, what I say to them, they have to go. I do this on purpose because that frantic energy that the players feel connects them to their characters who would also feel that tension. 1-round skill challenge, what do? The third thing here is a huge bonus, which is how fast these are to run. These aren't a long slog at all and let you keep telling the story and moving forward without large breaks of things going on turn by turn. You can be telling a great story, and once there's that moment that comes up where there's some tension and a situation the entire party has to go through, throw a 1-round skill challenge at them. Everyone at the table's involved, there's stakes at place with successes and failures, which adds a level of tension, and the whole thing gets over with so quickly, you get right back into the story. That's a win-win-win. But with all those wins, let's talk about failures. Just like in normal skill challenges, as the DM, you need to know what happens on a fail. I mean this on the individual level and the group level, because for an individual, does something bad happen to the individual that failed, or does it affect the entire group? Or does nothing bad happen from a fail and it only counts towards the overall success or failure? If you noticed in my example, I did have something bad happen on each roll that was failed. If you go back and watch it again, you'll see something happen to an individual or group after a failure. But now for the group level, what happens with 1 failure, 2, 3, 4, or all 5 failures, or however many party members you have? For my story, I had 5 different outcomes because I really want my players to know that every single roll matters, but you could easily have this be a pass or fail. Time out. Something to keep in mind when I say failure is that if they fail, it doesn't mean they actually failed at literally accomplishing that task. In the story I just told, they were trying to get back to the refugees, and in all 5 scenarios, they got back to the hideout, but at what cost? So I'm just saying that the outcome doesn't always have to be the thing that's in contention. Think of what good or bad things could happen to them around that event. If there were all 5 successes and they hacked through all the arachnids, they'd have a very easy time getting the rest of the refugees out. But with 4 failures, you saw what happened. Okay, so when would you use 1-round skill challenges and what would you use it for? If you're dealing with something that's fast-paced and there's an unexpected outcome that affects the entire group and the entire group is involved with it, That's a 1-round skill challenge. So here's some examples. The first one here that sticks out to me that I think you guys will love and be able to shake things up because they get pretty bland is a group stealth check. There's that moment at your table where everybody has to try and be stealthy in a certain moment. Instead of asking everybody for a blanket stealth check, all the same thing, and see what the numbers are and what if they succeeded or failed, what if they could choose what they do? How would that clunky paladin sneak around? What creative options might your players think of that doesn't involve a stealth check? Now, I will say don't go overboard with this, and every single thing you ask them for is a group skill challenge. They'll get really burned out with that. So this goes across the board for all situations where the DM would just ask all players to make the same check. And now instead, you can spice it up with this. Group survival checks to see if people get lost or not, group athletics checks to climb up things, group athletics checks for a chase. You could totally do a chase scene with a 1-round skill challenge. How are different people going to use their different abilities to help each other catch this person? Now, I could do a whole video on how overused this is, but group perception checks could be used for this as well. And if you want to start thinking outside the box, what if instead of a group dexterity saving throw to avoid some sort of damage, you gave them a 1-round skill challenge, and depending on successes and fails, they could dodge the damage? Boulders rolling down a hill instead of a global dex save, what do you guys do? Or dare I say, for some situations, what if you use this in place of combat? Now, don't get me wrong, I love me some combat, but man, it takes forever. So in place of those combats that you know your players are gonna win anyway, and they're really designed just to wear them down before something bigger, use this instead. The cinematic story that your players will tell will be next level. And keep your story moving. If you really do like these outside the box ideas, then seriously, hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to shake things up here and bring you consistent creative ideas every single week. I've got a ton of homebrew stuff already, and trust me, there's much more to come. Time out. Before the final tip here, let me say this. If you think I'm an evil DM for killing a character inside of a skill challenge, then you don't understand the type of game that I'm running. My players trust me as a DM, and they're invested in what's happening. Because let me say, first of all, that I would not have had that player die if I didn't already know that they would end the skill challenge right in front of a shaman that could resurrect them. So no, I would have not straight up killed a PC inside a skill challenge if that didn't happen at the end. But maybe there's a skill challenge in the future that I do. Because if you remove the chance for death to happen inside of a skill challenge, then I'm telling my players, no matter what happens, everything will be okay. It's just a skill challenge. Because if they are truly in a life or death situation and I throw a skill challenge at them, then that's what should be at stake, life or death. But I make it a point to have that relationship with my players that they can trust me and know that I'm not just going to kill them for no reason and that I'm fair. This was the first death that happened during a skill challenge, and I asked my players afterwards what they felt about it, and they loved it. But did that warlock get revived or not? I don't know. But they failed 4 out of 5 rolls, and they said, yeah, that should have happened. But if your players would feel bad about this, then don't do it. The threat of death is something that everyone should be on the same page about, and make sure you as the DM know what your players are comfortable with. But man, when your players trust your judgment calls as the DM and don't question you at every turn, you can tell some amazing stories together. Okay, final tip here is as the DM, you need to describe and develop what's going on in between each of these roles. You need to update the game state of what's happening so your players know what they can interact with after a success or a failure. Your description is what paints the picture of what's actually happening, and there's usually no battle map here. This is theater of the mind. Keep a fast-paced but vivid description of what's happening role by role. So if you want to get better at this, go back and watch that part of the video again. I'll put the timestamp right here. Watch how I update and change things quickly in between each role. You'll see me gather everything up and then see which player goes. And now we're going into overtime. I got a lot of questions in my 5K live stream where I did a big Q&A about how to handle large groups combat. And this is the amazing solution for that. I've had a group of 8 before, and yes, combats can take forever. But one thing I did a lot was a 1-round skill challenge for those medium and lower types of combat. This makes them think outside the box on what they can contribute towards this combat because there's so many of them and they can't overlap on their roles. This solves those 2 huge problems and lets all your players feel involved, and it doesn't take forever. I've done this multiple times, and every single time the group leaves this with a great cinematic combat that doesn't drag on and your players don't slip through the cracks. And now for those secret perks for the people that stay this long in the video. Next week, I'm going to be doing an instant live premiere, meaning right at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, this video is going to go up, and the first 3 people to leave a comment on the video win a $10 Amazon gift card. Now to clarify, I'm talking about commenting on the video, not talking in the live chat stream. That doesn't count. All you have to do is go to that video, go to the actual comments part, and say, skill challenge, or some word that has skill and challenge in it, I'll know that you saw this, and I know that you've been watching to the end, and I just want to thank you guys for jumping on a video and staying to the end. And me being able to do thank yous like this is only possible because of my supporters over on Patreon. In fact, one of my Platinum Dragons, Bob, won a $10 gift card in that live stream we did. Stay tuned, we'll be doing another one real soon, but going back to work this week has really kicked my butt. But Bob said he didn't want the gift card and he wanted to give it back to you guys. So again, thank you, Bob, and thank you to all my dragons on Patreon and my YouTube members. It has been awesome for people to join in with this passion of mine, and I really do appreciate the support. And my biggest thank you so far has been that $500 giveaway that just ended, and here's the winners. And if you didn't forget, our channel sponsor, Neverending, is doing custom art for those first place winners, and I cannot wait to show you what they make. They both wrote up a description of one of their D&D characters. I gave it to Neverending, and they're gonna draw up their own personal custom characters. And some breaking news is since they accomplished their Kickstarter, they've actually lowered all the prices on all their tiers. So if you want to check out their amateur animation platform, check it out in the links down below. So if you want to see another skill challenge story, click right here. And if you want to spice things up and add some more homebrew stuff to your game, click right here. Want to keep this channel moving? Support for Patreons right here. And until next time, stay creative and think outside that box. Peace.